In so many paintings of the Virgin Mary in the 17th century, you can find a few symbols that keep repeating. Mary is standing on a crescent moon, surrounded with the sunlight. She's floating in the middle of clouds, and usually you can find angels all around her. Why did this way of depicting Mary become so frequent in 17th century Spain? There's actually a history of centuries of strong debate and disagreement hidden behind this image. So, let me explain. Welcome to my channel, by the way. Throughout the history of art, from the beginning of Christianity until now, Mary, Mother of Jesus, has always been one of the most repeated depictions in all sorts of mediums and different religious places. The subject of these paintings are usually different parts of the life of Christ. There are so many paintings showing Mary embracing the child Jesus, either alone or with other saints and visitors. We can also see her a lot in the scenes of crucifixion, mourning over her son. But the subject of the paintings that I'm talking about in this video is different. These paintings are all with the same title, the Immaculate Conception. If you're like me and you aren't a Catholic, the concept of Immaculate Conception of Mary might be foreign to you. But we're not going to talk about the religious side of it all. What's really interesting for me is the political and social evolution of the concept that lies behind these paintings. So what is the Immaculate Conception? It all goes back to the concept of the original sin in Christianity. Christians believe that when Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they committed the original sin. And since then, there has been a divide between humans and God because of that sin. That every person is conceived in the womb with that original sin. But Jesus, being Jesus, was an exception. He is thought to be pure of the original sin. All good and dandy so far. But the debate starts when you ask, what about Mary? Did she have the original sin? Or was she a pure vessel for the Son of God? This question is the root of the belief of the Immaculate Conception. The belief that Mary was also conceived in the womb without the original sin. This debate starts from the early centuries of Christianity and continues for centuries up until the middle of the 19th century, when the Catholic Pope declares the Immaculate Conception as a pillar, a dogma of Catholic belief. Now, here is the problem. Imagine you're an artist in the 16th or 17th century. If they come and tell you to paint the scene of crucifixion of Christ, you're going to do it. If they ask for a deposition of the Christ, you're going to do it, because these are physical, concrete topics. But if they come and tell you to paint the Immaculate Conception of Mary, what would you do? How would you portray an unborn child not having the burden of the original sin? That's an abstract concept. And the process of solving this problem starts from the medieval art up until the Baroque art of Spain in the 17th century. So the paintings that we saw in the beginning are actually the final, fully developed answer to the problem of depicting this abstract concept. Let's briefly go through how artists tackled this challenge and how they ended up putting Mary on the moon. One of the early methods of showing Mary's conception was referring back to the story of her parents. The story goes like this. Joachim and Anne were a solid couple with only one problem. They couldn't get pregnant. So one day, as Joachim had banished himself away from the city, the angel Gabriel appears to both Joachim and Anne separately and tells them that they will soon have a child. So they meet up at the gates of Jerusalem and they kiss. So because in this story the conception of Mary had a divine root, showing the kiss turned into a way to depict the Immaculate Conception. But because the origin of the story was from a doubtful source, it wasn't widely accepted. Another way that developed was by depicting three people together: Jesus, Mary, and Mary's mom, Saint Anne. This parallel depiction of two mothers and their children insists on the parallel that not only Jesus is immaculate, but also Mary is immaculate. This approach doesn't stick either, because it doesn't show the absence of the original sin clearly. For a second, let me remind you that this whole thing was a very controversial topic in the Christian world. In some parts, it was much more accepted than in other parts, and in general, discussing this topic wasn't normal and comfortable. You could easily offend people's beliefs by it, especially as the church didn't accept it yet. So using the nature of this debate, some artists like Vincenzo di Antonio Frediani chose to depict the controversial nature of the topic as a way of showing the Immaculate Conception. The result is a bit weird. This painting is just filled up with different symbolism, and Jesus is saying to Mary that the law was made for all others but not you. And then there are others, each with a text box telling about their beliefs on the Immaculate Conception. And in general, the painting isn't as harmonious as you would expect from a good painting. It looks more like a comic book, with bubble conversations. Giorgio Vasari does something different. He paints the Immaculate Conception as an allegory, as Mary literally being better than Adam and Eve, being above them and leaving them behind. But then, from here on, we have another approach that wins over all others. The basics of the approach is this. They decide, let's read the Bible and find verses that could be referring to Mary and her status as an immaculate saint. And using that, let's get to a list of elements that can relate to it all. Now, it's here that we have Revelations 12 that describes a woman like this. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. This description is famous as the apocalyptic woman, accompanied with a verse from the Song of Songs that says, "Tutta pulchra es amica mea." You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. And picking and choosing from the verses that could refer to Mary, you get all the elements that repeat in the 17th century paintings of the Immaculate Conception, mostly relying on the two verses you heard. And because Spain was mostly in favor of the sinless Mary, we see so many of these paintings there. But the person who put it all together into a specific guideline for painters is Francisco Pacheco. He was a Spanish painter and he painted several versions of the Tutta pulchra Mary. And based on these, he gave this guideline in his book on painting. She should be depicted as a young girl of 13 or 14 years old, wearing a white tunic with blue mantles. Like the apocalyptic woman, she should be clothed with the sun and have 12 stars around her head. And she must be standing on a moon. If it's a crescent moon, then the point should face down. Her hair must be long and hanging over her shoulder, and he suggests that these symbols should be carried by angels. And these rules stuck, more or less. Later on, big painters of Spain all followed it. El Greco, Diego Velázquez, Bartolomé Stepan Murillo, Bartolomé Stepan Murillo, Bartolomé Stepan Murillo, Bartolomé Stepan Murillo, and so many others. After 1661, the ban was officially lifted. People were no longer banned from expressing their belief in the Immaculate Conception. So as a result, artists started to simplify their compositions and the number of elements used in them. And finally, we ended up with the masterpieces of Murillo. Right now, when you say Immaculate Conception, you're probably going to remember one of Murillo's many magical compositions. The best versions of a subject matter that partly defines the era of Spanish 17th century art. Thank you for watching to the end. In this channel, I make videos about art history, theory, and media, like this. So if you're interested in such topics, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button under the video. That would help grow the channel much faster. And also tell me in the comments if there are any other topics that pique your interest. Thanks again for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next video.